Hi, I'm Mike Ebert here today with Mike Licona, who is a New Testament historian with the North American Mission Board. And Mike, we're talking about the evidences, the historical evidences for Jesus' resurrection. And in your line of studies, if you were talking with someone, for instance, who didn't believe the Bible, didn't believe it was true, what other things would you point them toward to show them that there are evidences out there that Jesus existed and that he rose from the dead?
Well, Mike, first I'd say that there are a lot of scholars out there who don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. They don't believe that Jesus performed actual miracles, but they will approach the New Testament literature for what just about everybody grants that it is, and that is a collection of literature, early Christian literature from the first century or within 100 years of Jesus. We can do that. I mean, as a Christian, I can do that with the Quran. I don't believe that it's inspired by God in any sense. But I can still approach it as a student of history and learn things about early Islam. We can do that with the New Testament as well. So we look at, say, the earliest writings written by a guy named Paul, and we can learn a lot about Jesus and the early church from those. And it's those kinds of things, without presupposing that the Bible is inerrant or inspired, infallible, or even generally trustworthy, we can still learn a lot of things about Jesus, what we referred to earlier as the historical bedrock.
So even though there may be a group of scholars, maybe even a majority that would question some of the things like you mentioned, they at least have agreement that the Bible is a historical document that can be trusted on certain things. So someone who's going to dismiss the New Testament altogether would be brushing aside a lot of what current scholarship believes about the New Testament.
Absolutely. That would be a very unsophisticated historical approach. I mean, you'd find people on the internet or who haven't really studied this who would do that. But like I said, I wouldn't even do that with the Quran. There's plenty that I can learn from the Quran without agreeing with its general message.
So when we talk about the historical bedrock, these are things that, would you say a majority of biblical scholarship agrees on, or, okay.
Sure.
And what elements of that pertain to or point to the resurrection that we could build a case for the resurrection on?
Well, you've got Jesus' death by crucifixion, granted by about 100%, nearly 100% of all scholars today. You've got that subsequent to Jesus' death, a number of people had experiences that they were persuaded were of the risen Jesus, and that these experiences occurred in individual and group setting and in group settings. Nearly 100% grant those. And that a man named Paul, a church persecutor, had an experience that radically transformed his life to become one of Christianity's most able defenders because he believed it was the risen Jesus appearing to him. Nearly 100% of all scholars today who studied the subject grant that one as well.
So when you're talking about nearly 100%, do you mean just Christian scholars or all the folks out there that are studying New Testament history?
Oh yes, I mean we're talking atheists, agnostics, Jews, liberal, conservative Christians. We're talking about everything. And it's a very heterogeneous group, meaning that different than, say, the Jesus Seminar, which is a group of, I don't know, 140, 150 scholars, most of whom reside on the radical fringe of the theological left. So when they got together and wrote the book, The Five Gospels, and they were voting on different sayings and deeds of Jesus, and they said, well, we think that only 16% of what's recorded of Jesus in the New Testament of what he said, and 12 or 14% of what he did, we think that he actually did and said. Maybe only 30, 40 scholars out of that group of 140, 50 voted. But what do you have here? You already start off with a small group, and you have a minuscule number of scholars within that group but they're all on the fringe of the theological left. All it tells us is that liberal scholars on the fringe of the theological left think this way. But when we're talking about some of these facts that I just mentioned a moment ago, we're talking about a heterogeneous group. We're talking about liberals, evangelicals, atheists, agnostics, Jewish scholars, all of these, and who have specialized in the subject or have done extensive work on it. That gives us a more accurate view of what scholarship is believing today.
Now, you have often debated Muslims in universities and other settings. Is there as much, now that Islam has about 1 billion adherents worldwide, is there as much study now among scholars on the Quran as there is, for instance, on the Bible?
No, but there are certainly more work in this area being done today. They're studying the textual evidence for the Quran. They're finding that the Quran isn't nearly as uniform in terms of the Quranic manuscript evidence as Muslims have been proclaiming over the years. There are a lot of variations within it. And there's a lot about Islamic history, like in terms of the compiling of the Quran and some other things that, you know, are questionable. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of this as Islam has become more prominent in the news since 9/11. We're going to see more of this coming out because there are more scholars that are studying this today.
And you mentioned the historical bedrock earlier, and go into maybe some detail, though, about some secondary things that maybe not the majority of scholars, but a lot of scholars really say the evidence leans in this direction, because there are some things like that as well.
Yeah, like for example, the empty tomb. Somewhere between 65 to 75% of all scholars writing on the subject since 1975 grant that the tomb was empty. They may not believe that it's because of Jesus' resurrection, but they still grant that the tomb was empty. The reason this wouldn't make the cut for our historical bedrock is it's not nearly 100% of all scholars. You know, if we're talking historical bedrock, you want at least 90%, I would guess. But I think the evidence for it is strong. It's just going to be more or less a person's worldview, I think, that's going to keep them from accepting it. But because you don't have the large majority, or I should say the nearly universal consensus of scholars on that, it doesn't make the cut. Or say the appearance to James. Most scholars who write on the subject agree that James was a skeptical half-brother of Jesus, and that he converted to Christianity after his death when he had an experience that he believed was of Jesus appearing to him. Now, the reason I haven't included that in the historical bedrock is because virtually all, right about 90% of all scholars who opine on the subject grant that James had an appearance or an experience that he thought was of Jesus, and he converted as a result. And it is from a heterogeneous group of scholars. However, I only counted maybe around 30 scholars who comment on this out of all, you know, who are writing on the subject of the resurrection. So I didn't feel like it was a large enough sampling to put within that historical bedrock.
Now, you said heterogeneous group of scholars. What is that, and why is that important?
Well, I mentioned about the Jesus Seminar a moment ago. That would just be those on the theological left opining. When I say heterogeneous, I'm talking about it's very inclusive. Liberal, conservative, agnostics, atheists, Jewish scholars, all in there. And the reason that's important is because, hey, if you even have all these others, atheists and agnostics that are granting these, the evidence must be pretty good to convince those who would disagree with your worldview that these things are true.